Myles Garrett's name surfacing in trade talks this week isn't just shocking, it's strategic. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reports that the Browns are seriously considering offloading their defensive cornerstone, not because of performance issues, but as a deliberate political message.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
It's a move designed to pivot the franchise toward a future anchored by Shedeur, their bench quarterback prospect. This isn't about wins and losses anymore. It's about power dynamics inside the building, with front office figures and agent influences creating a volatile mix of ambition and desperation. Garrett's no-trade clause makes the scenario even more surreal, but also underscores how far the organization may be willing to go to reset. If Garrett is moved, the Browns will potentially stack first-round picks for 2026, signaling a rapid teardown and rebuild. That shakeup would also clear a path for Sanders, whose current bench status already raises eyebrows given Dillon Gabriel struggles. A move of this magnitude would cement a broader transition in Cleveland's football philosophy, from building around defense to going all in on a quarterback-centric future. The Cleveland Browns on the verge of making one of the most bizarre, jaw-dropping decisions in recent NFL memory, trading Myles Garrett, a generational, franchise-defining defensive end, just to pave the way for Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback who hasn't even started a single NFL game yet. This is not a rumor mill sideshow. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, it's a very real conversation happening inside the Browns front office this week. And it's not about performance. It's not even about need. This move is political, strategic, desperate, call it whatever you want. But one thing is clear. Something inside the Browns organization is cracking, and the world is watching. So let's get into it. Because this isn't just about a trade. It's about a franchise possibly blowing up its defensive core to force a quarterback change, and doing it days before a high-stakes matchup against the Jets. Start with the facts. Myles Garrett isn't just good. He's the heart of Cleveland's defense. A leader, a top-tier edge rusher. And, oh yeah, he has a no-trade clause. Yet, here we are with reports that the team is considering dealing him anyway. Why? To stockpile first-round picks and start building a new offense from scratch. 4 first-rounders. That's the number floating around. 4 first-round picks in 2026 if Garrett is traded. That's the kind of draft capital teams fantasize about when they want to rebuild from the ground up. And make no mistake, this is a rebuild, no matter how the Browns try to spin it. Owner Jimmy Haslam is publicly standing by head coach Kevin Stefanski, but behind closed doors, the tone is very different. There's serious tension in the building, internal factions, conflicting visions, and it's all coming to a head because the Browns' offense has been painful to watch this season. Let's talk quarterbacks. Dillon Gabriel is still somehow the starter, despite being statistically dead last across multiple offensive metrics. His performance has been honestly embarrassing, and yet he's still taking snaps. Why? That's where it gets murky. According to sources, agency politics may be playing a bigger role than anyone's admitting. There are whispers of certain player agents having influence over personnel decisions, especially around Gabriel's continued starting role. Coaching ties, front office friendships, backroom pressure. It's all creating a mess. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, yes, the highly touted QB prospect with serious upside, is just sitting on the bench, watching, waiting, and apparently becoming a central piece of the Browns' long-term plans. But the only way to fully commit to that future? Clear the path, get the picks, rebuild the offense, trade Myles Garrett. It's a wild calculation. Trading away your best player to prepare for 2026, not even next season, is a pretty clear signal that this year is already being written off. It's not about winning now. It's about optics, about creating the illusion of a plan, about distracting from a season that's rapidly slipping into irrelevance. If this sounds like franchise mismanagement on display, it kind of is. The irony? There's actually logic to the madness. If the Browns had secure 4 first-rounders, and if Shedeur Sanders turns out to be the real deal, and if the offensive rebuild hits just right, this gamble could pay off in 2 years. That's a lot of ifs. And in the NFL, You don't get credit for ifs. You get fired for losses. Right now, the Browns' offense is broken. Their wide receiver group is underperforming. Their line is inconsistent. Gabriel looks like he's drowning every week, and the fans are not happy. It's clear this roster, as currently constructed, cannot compete at the level the team expected when the season started. So, management is scrambling, and all signs point to Sanders taking over sooner rather than later. If Gabriel collapses against the Jets, which, let's be honest, feels more likely than not, expect the Sanders era to begin, possibly within the week. But that also means the pressure is on, because if Shedeur doesn't immediately shine, the whole plan implodes. Trading Garrett only makes sense if the new offense works. If Sanders flops, if the picks don't convert, if the locker room fractures, the Browns will be setting themselves back years. And that's not just dramatic speculation. That's the reality of blowing up your defense for a rebuild that hasn't even started. Let's not forget, this all hinges on Garrett waiving his no-trade clause. If he doesn't agree, none of this happens. But even the fact that conversations have progressed this far, it says everything you need to know about where the Browns are mentally. They're done with this season. They're already playing chess with a 2026 board. And yet, fans are still expected to show up and cheer like this is a team with vision, with unity, with leadership. To be clear, Garrett's potential trade isn't about football logic. It's a message to agents, to critics, to rival teams. It says, we're blowing it up, we're done pretending. We're starting fresh, with or without your approval. It's a bold, aggressive, borderline reckless move. And the Browns are treating it like the only option left. Let's call it what it is, a distraction. A desperate franchise trying to spin chaos into strategy. But you can't talk your way out of bad decisions. And if this goes wrong, it won't just be Garrett walking out the door. It'll be fans, staff, recruits. It'll be the unraveling of whatever stability the Browns thought they had left. So here we are, just days away from a game against the Jets. Dillon Gabriel is still the starter. Somehow, Shedeur Sanders is warming up in the background. Myles Garrett's name is being floated like a trade chip at a poker table. And the Browns are pretending this is all part plan. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just another chapter in the long, confusing saga of a team that can't decide if it's building for the future or still pretending to compete today. If you've been following the Browns for any length of time, you already know this isn't even their most confusing moment, but it is one of the boldest. And if they actually follow through with trading Garrett to accelerate a rebuild around an untested quarterback, that's a franchise-altering decision, for better or worse. Let us know what you think. Is the Garrett trade a smart long-term move or a total meltdown in slow motion? Should Shedeur Sanders be starting now? And will the Browns regret betting their entire future on this plan? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the wildest moves in sports and entertainment. Because if the Browns keep operating like this, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. And here's the real kicker. Even if the Browns don't pull the trigger on a Garrett trade this week, the fact that it's out in the open means the damage is already done. You don't float the idea of trading your franchise player unless you're seriously testing the waters. And once that cat's out of the bag, it doesn't go back in. Garrett has been the identity of this team for years. Defensive leader, locker room anchor, fan favorite. If you're willing to let go of that guy, everyone else is fair game. It sends a message to the roster. No one is safe. Not even the faces of the franchise. You think the locker room isn't watching this unfold in real time? You think other players aren't talking to their agents right now, wondering what the hell is going on in Cleveland? You think this doesn't impact morale heading into a must-win game? Because if you're trying to rally a team, letting it leak that you might trade the best player before Sunday's matchup is not exactly the way to do it. And what about Stefanski? Publicly backed by ownership, but now coaching a team swirling in trade rumors, quarterback politics, and front office fractures. He's in the crossfire, whether he admits it or not. If he benches Gabriel for Sanders, it'll be seen as caving to pressure. If he doesn't, and Gabriel bombs again, everyone will point fingers at him. There is no clean way out of this for him. Either he's complicit in a disastrous season, or he's the fall guy for decisions that are way above his pay grade. Let's be real here. This kind of dysfunction doesn't start overnight. These internal power plays, the whispers about agency influence, the disconnect between management and coaching, it all points to a deeper rot, one that's been festering under the surface, masked by just enough success to keep people distracted. But now that the offense is stalled out and the defense can't carry them every week, all those cracks are finally showing. Loudly. There's also something incredibly ironic about how the Browns are handling Shedeur Sanders. The same team that refuses to start him while the offense is gasping for air is also apparently ready to burn it all down to build around him. Like, pick a lane. Either he's your guy or he's not. Keeping him benched while planning your entire franchise strategy around his future is a contradiction that makes zero football sense. And fans aren't dumb. They can see the writing on the wall. They know what a mid-season smokescreen looks like. And this Garrett trade leak feels like a deflection. A distraction from the fact that the team has failed to solve its most basic problem. Who's going to play quarterback? Dillon Gabriel, bless him, is not the answer. And everyone seems to know it except the people making the final call. If Gabriel lays another egg against the Jets, especially in prime time, with all eyes on Cleveland, there will be no excuse left. The pressure to start Sanders will hit a boiling point. And if the team still refuses to make the switch, that's when things get really ugly. Fans start checking out. Players start looking for the exit. And media starts asking the kind of questions that ownership really doesn't want to answer. Because again, this isn't about one bad game or one controversial trade idea. This is about a pattern. A franchise that's constantly trying to reinvent itself without ever addressing the root problems. And you know what happens when a team keeps rebranding without doing the work? Chaos, confusion, collapse. Now back to the trade logistics. Even if Garrett were to waive his no-trade clause, and let's be honest, that's a massive if, there's no guarantee the Browns get the return they want. Multiple first-round picks? Sure, it sounds great on paper. But draft picks are lottery tickets. You never know what you're getting. And replacing Garrett is not just a personnel issue. It's a culture issue. He's the kind of player who changes the energy of a locker room. Losing him doesn't just hurt your pass rush. It guts your identity. And you're putting all your chips on the belief that a couple of 2026 rookies and an improving quarterback will be enough to rebuild from scratch? It's bold. It's aggressive. But it's also wildly risky. And if the team doesn't trade Garrett, what then? You've just told your best player he's expendable. You've told your fan base you're more focused on 2 years from now than winning games today. That's a hard hole to climb out of. There's also the question no one wants to answer. What if Shedeur isn't that guy? Yes, he has the tools. Yes, he has the name recognition. But NFL success is not a guarantee, even for top college talent. The Browns are setting themselves up for a future that assumes Sanders becomes a franchise QB. But we've seen countless prospects fizzle under pressure, especially when they're thrown into a team that's already in chaos. It's not fair to him either. He's being positioned as the savior of a franchise in meltdown mode. That's a lot to ask of any young quarterback, especially when the offensive line is shaky and the playmakers around him are underperforming. This isn't building around a rookie. This is throwing him into the fire and hoping he doesn't burn. So here's the big picture. The Browns are sitting on a crumbling offense, a misfiring quarterback, and a defense that's being asked to carry more than it can handle. Their solution? Trade the defensive cornerstone and hope that a future built on draft picks and an untested QB somehow pans out. That's not a plan. That's a gamble disguised as a strategy. And it's a familiar one. Because if there's one thing the Browns have mastered, it's trying to outsmart the process. They're always looking for the shortcut, the backdoor fix, the magic quarterback who can solve everything overnight. But it never works like that. Not in this league. So here we are. The Browns are teetering on the edge of a full-blown identity crisis. They're being pulled in opposite directions, between the pressure to win now and the temptation to blow it all up for a shinier future. But the clock is ticking. The Jets' game looms. Garrett's status is in limbo. Gabriel's leash is shorter than ever. And Shedeur Sanders? He's watching it all unfold from the sidelines, knowing that the second he takes the field, he's not just stepping into a huddle, He's stepping into a firestorm. How this ends, no one knows yet. But one thing's for sure, whatever happens next in Cleveland, it won't be quiet. And let's be honest, the Browns haven't exactly earned the benefit of the doubt. This is the same franchise that's changed quarterbacks more times than you've changed phone chargers. The same front office that's made headline-grabbing moves that somehow managed to backfire every single time. So when people hear we're trading Myles Garrett to build around Shedeur Sanders, their first reaction isn't, wow, smart move. It's more like, here we go again, because we've seen this story before. The shiny rebuild, the dramatic pivot, the big risky, we're thinking long-term speech. And then, 3 losing seasons, another head coach fired, and a completely different front office pretending they're the ones who finally figured it out. And the craziest part is, this team isn't even in the bottom of the league. Not yet. They're underachieving, yes, but they have a defense that's kept them competitive in games they had no business being in. A defense built around, you guessed it, Myles Garrett. So to even entertain the idea of shipping him off before the season is over, while the offense is still in flux, before Sanders has taken a single professional snap, it's not just bold, it's borderline delusional. And that's where the political angle comes in. Because no one makes a decision like this based purely on football. This isn't a tactical restructure of the roster. This is a power play. A reshuffling of the organizational chessboard, likely driven by egos, optics, and a desire to show we have a vision even when the vision is chaos in disguise. It's about showing control during a losing season. About putting the media spotlight somewhere else. Anywhere else. Besides a quarterback disaster that's been dragging the team week to week. And in the middle of all this, the players, the fans, the coaching staff, all stuck in limbo, wondering what the next domino will be. What happens if Garrett finds out this wasn't just talk, that his name was seriously shopped around, that the front office looked at him, the guy who's been carrying this defense, and said, we'd rather have draft picks. That's a betrayal you don't walk back from. Even if the trade doesn't happen, the message has been sent loud and clear. Garrett is a means to an end. That's not how you treat cornerstone talent. That's not how you build loyalty. That's how you create fractures that linger for years. Meanwhile, the fans, they're being asked to buy into a future built on ifs. If Shedeur lives up to the hype, if the picks work out, if the coaching staff can turn it around, if the locker room doesn't implode. You know what fans don't like? Watching the team punt on a season before Thanksgiving. And yeah, maybe the Browns have already accepted that 2025 isn't their year, but the rest of the league isn't waiting around. Other teams are getting better. Right now, other franchises are fixing their QB rooms without gutting their defenses. Other GMs are building cohesive rosters, not burning down their strongest unit to roll the dice on a guy who hasn't thrown a single pro touchdown. There's a reason people are calling this the most confusing decision of the Browns post 2020 era. And while Shedeur Sanders might very well be the answer, he could be great. It's still baffling that he's not already starting. If he's your future, and the season is already going off the rails, why wait? What's the logic in keeping Gabriel under center when he's dead last in metrics and visibly dragging the offense? Oh, right, because of the agent connections. That's the part of the story that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. Multiple reports are pointing to the idea that Gabriel's continued presence as starter might not be a purely coaching decision, that certain agency relationships and political dynamics are keeping him on the field longer than he deserves. And that is a serious problem. Because once your depth chart is being influenced by anything other than merit and performance, you've lost control of the team. Players know it. Coaches feel it. And fans can smell it from a mile away. It undermines everything. Team culture, competitive spirit, trust. You think the rest of the locker room isn't watching this play out and thinking. So it's not about who's playing better. It's about who knows the right people. That's how you lose a locker room. And let's not pretend Shedeur is in some ideal situation here, either. If the Browns do make the switch after the Jets game, they'll be throwing him into the fire with a weakened line. Receivers who haven't found a rhythm all year, and the pressure of an entire city demanding results immediately. That's not a debut. That's a setup. And it gets worse. If Garrett is traded before Sanders even takes the field, what kind of message does that send? We believe in you so much. We're going to get the defense first and then start you. That's like putting a rookie pilot in the cockpit and then yanking off the landing gear just to see if he can fly. The timeline doesn't make sense. The logic doesn't hold. And the internal noise is only getting louder. All of this is to say, this moment feels like a crossroads, a pivot point in Cleveland's trajectory. One path leads to a smart, strategic rebuild with clear leadership and a plan that makes football sense. The other, a messy implosion, where PR moves and political maneuvering outrank on-field results. And from what we're seeing so far, the Browns are dangerously close to choosing the wrong one. It's a textbook example of what happens when a franchise lets desperation drive decisions. When ownership is tired of hearing the boos, when management is tired of justifying past failures, when the coaching staff is stuck between a broken offense and a quarterback controversy they can't control. In that kind of chaos, even the smartest people start making bad choices. Or worse, they start making choices just to make noise. And that's what this Garrett trade feels like. Noise. A loud, dramatic gesture that's more about narrative than necessity. A way to spin the season from disaster to strategic transition. A way to grab control of the story before it spins further out of hand. But if they do it, if they actually trade Myles Garrett, there's no undo button. No way to smooth it over when Sanders struggles in his third start. No way to rebuild trust with a defense that just watched its MVP get treated like a trade asset. No way to explain to fans why yet another season was sacrificed in the name of potential. That's the gamble. That's the risk. And it's one the Browns seem increasingly willing to take. So where do you stand? Should Cleveland tear it all down now to prepare for a Sanders-led future? Or is this just another panic move from a team that never learned to build around the talent it already had? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you're here for the drama, the meltdowns, the front office follies, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks the Browns are turning it around this year. Because at this point, even they don't seem convinced.